Welcome to the Wired for Success podcast, your show for ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneurs who want to build million-dollar businesses without sacrificing their health, relationships, or happiness, who understand that in order to build their empire, they need a solid foundation, and that the more they are thriving, the more their business is thriving too. This show brings you the very best from science, self-development, and entrepreneurship to set you up for sustainable success. Hi, I'm Claudia Garbutt, the scientist turned mindset and high-performance coach for entrepreneurs, and I help you get wired for success. Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Wired for Success podcast, where we talk about all things science, self-development, and entrepreneurship that help you get to that next level of success in your life and business. And my wonderful guest today is health entrepreneur Boomer Anderson. He's the CEO of Smarter Not Harder, the makers of Troscriptions. He's also the CEO of Health Optimization, Medicine and Practice, a nonprofit focused on educating doctors and practitioners on how to optimize for health rather than treat disease. And I love that approach. So welcome, Boomer, and thank you so much for taking the time to be on my show today.
Thank you for having me, Claudia. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and I look forward to conversing over the next minutes, hours, however long we go.
Let's see how long we go. Boomer, can we maybe start by you telling us a little bit about your background and how you became interested in the health optimization and health technology space?
So we're going to go way back here, and I'm going to try and abbreviate this story because it's my whole life after all. But I was fortunate enough growing up to have a mother who was a yoga teacher, and my father was in operations at a mutual fund company or finance company in the United States. And there I had this very much like East meets West upbringing. My mother was an early adopter to meditation before meditation was cool. I distinctly remember like coming home when I was very, very young and watching my mom sitting there and staring at a wall and just breathing and wondering like, okay, do I need to call the hospital, right? But she was meditating. She was reading the Bhagavad Gita. She was, very into Yogananda and a whole bunch of other sort of Eastern modalities. And then the flip side of that, I had this very strict disciplinarian, very meticulous, operations-driven father. And so, fast forward a little bit, the benefits of having a yoga teacher for a mother are, you have somebody that's there always as sort of your assistant coach in performance. And I saw this very early on in athletics. I was an academic All-American when it came to lacrosse and some other sports. So like there was that sport meets mental component as well. But really the first time I saw the value of health when it came to performance, particularly in the workplace or in this case, academia, was when I was in university and I was studying for a calculus exam. And calculus for me, like it just didn't make sense until I actually went into finance. But I was stressed and I was freaking out before this exam, like one of those freakouts where you're truly like having a panic. And I couldn't really prepare myself for this exam. And so, like any good boy, called mom and said, Mom, what the hell do I do? She said, just take 3 deep breaths. It was pranayama breathing. And all of a sudden my mind cleared. And I was like, oh shit, maybe there's something here. Right. And that later carried on to a career in Wall Street. So I graduated from university, went to work in New York, then went to work in Singapore. They sent me over to Singapore. And I had this very high pressure, high stress job. But the beautiful thing about working in investment banking is that it's very easy to calculate a return on health, meaning for every dollar I invested in my own health, I could see a result in my performance, and that performance ultimately led to an increase in my bonus at the end of the year. So I could calculate that return on health. And I got very into exercise, whatever the diet of the day was according to Men's Health. And eventually did everything I wanted to in finance, decided to leave, and in that process discovered I had a heart issue, which for somebody who spent a lot of their life trying to avoid a heart issue because they have genetic predispositions to that, it was kind of a shock to me. I was this guy who at the time I had sub 10% body fat. I was, able to run a 6-minute mile, these kind of markers that you put so much weight on, and all of a sudden I have a heart issue. And I'm like, what the hell? So I sat there as I was leaving finance and wondering, well, okay, there's two options of play. There was the reason why I was leaving finance was I wanted to build something on my own. And then there was this other thing of like taking care of my health. So I was really trying to figure out how not to die. And that led me down a very interesting path because being from finance and being very comfortable with numbers, I got very into the omics at a time when not many people were digging into what we can do with our 23andMe tests, right? But the 23andMe test, that's probability based, so it's not really incredibly accurate. And then I started digging around other omic structures, like things like metabolomics, so where our cells are now and where they have been, and trying to figure out what I can do and really unpack myself using this data. Along that journey, I ended up meeting a few people, including my mentor, Dr. Ted Achacoso, and he brought me into, or educated me really about his framework, which later became the framework that we teach doctors and practitioners in health optimization medicine and practice. So you can say that I was very into health early on. I've been into health almost all of my life. And I got very, very into health when I realized, like, hey, you have an increased chance of dying. So let's try and figure this out here. So that's the journey in a nutshell. But it's been a beautiful one, sometimes frustrating. But, along the way, I've started a few companies some of them are pretty prominent here in Europe. Some of them are pretty prominent in the United States. And I've had a lot of fun along the way.
What an interesting journey. Thank you so much for sharing. And you've already kind of hinted at this, but maybe you can dig a little deeper here. So if we take a step back and talk about health optimization in general, it's a term that we hear so often, but what does it really mean and why is it so important, especially for entrepreneurs and executives?
Sure. So sometimes it helps to proceed with a definition. So thank you, Claudia, for actually to ask this question directly, because if you were to go to, I imagine right now, if you were to go to 20 different doctors or 20 different health coaches and ask for a definition of health, you would probably get 20 different definitions. Yeah. And usually that definition would begin with the absence of disease. And of course, that's important. And so the way I think of the definition of health is the way we kind of define it within our nonprofit, which is A plus B plus C. So simple arithmetic. A is the absence of disease. B is the balance between anabolism, so growth, and catabolism, which is really that, I guess you would call it a destruction in some ways. And then through the life cycle of the organism, meaning based on your age. And so when we talk about health optimization, what we're really doing is we're balancing networks, nutrient and hormone networks predominantly. And what we're then looking for is how do we balance them at a time when you're at your optimal levels, which is between the ages of 21 and 30. So we have evolutionary derived optimal values that we can actually look to benchmark for. And those are easily found, and certain testing companies actually have them as part of their reference ranges. But to answer your question as to why an entrepreneur should care, besides the obvious, which is you don't want to die, let's go through what the benefits of sort of optimal health can be. And sometimes it's easier to see like what the benefits of suboptimal health are, or the benefits of the costs of suboptimal health. And that can include things like brain fog. That can include things like being overweight. That can include things like fatigue. That can include things like getting sick, all of which are a cost to an entrepreneur. So if you think about an entrepreneur's job, like fundamentally as an entrepreneur, what are you trying to do? You're trying to put something out in the world that didn't exist before. And so you need to convince people that they need it. And what does that take? That takes energy, that takes focus, that takes attention to detail, that takes organization. All of these things become immensely harder if you're not in an optimal state of health. So when I work with somebody, and I don't work with very many people anymore because, I'm also running a couple of companies, but when I work with somebody, they are on that mission as well. So they know the value of focus. They know the value of being able to sit down, and in a world where our attention spans are sub 3 seconds, we are looking at how I can unlock focus periods of 90 minutes or more in people, how I can give you the energy to make it through the day so that as you're having conversation after conversation or to do after to do, or if you think about an entrepreneur's job, particularly if you're in a CEO seat, and those two are different and overlap at the same time, but a lot of that job is putting out fires. And so there's an element of resilience there. And so what you're doing is you're giving yourself the foundational support through health optimization so that you can go out and attack this world with energy, with resilience, with focus, and with drive. And all of those are key ingredients to making anyone listening to this a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would like to add that things like emotional mastery, something that a lot of people might not associate with health optimization initially, but I think it's one of the key aspects too. I mean, if you're run down, if you don't sleep well, then we know that you're so much more reactive. You can't stay responsive. You act out. You just snap. So if you want to do yourself a favor and optimize your relationships as well, you have to start with yourself so that you are in a position to stay calm and relaxed. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, let me just pan out for a second here, because some people listening to this are like, hey, this guy was in finance, now he's in health, and I kind of straddle both worlds. What's the connection? And if you look at the connection between finance and health, there's this genuine underlying interest in how humans work. And from a macro perspective or from a global perspective, you can witness human decision-making through financial markets. So you get to see societal level decision-making through financial markets. And then you cut all the way down into the cell and its various networks. And you get to understand really the mechanisms by which cause human behavior. And so one of the things you just said is so important, Claudia, when it comes to relating with people, when it comes to your mood, when it comes to stress and that resilience, being able to balance your hormones and nutrients has numerous benefits there. So think about neurotransmitters, right? Norepinephrine being sort of a sympathetic nervous system signal. If that's completely out of whack, as it was with me for most of my life, as I'm imagining most of the people listening to this, that balance between parasympathetic and sympathetic is oftentimes switched into that sympathetic area. Well, then looking at the flip side of sympathetic neurotransmitter like norepinephrine into a parasympathetic neurotransmitter like acetylcholine. Well, once we have those markers, once we know what's out of balance, we can actually do various lifestyle recommendations, lifestyle modifications, as well as supplementing, changing your diet, and a whole bunch of other things in order to bring it back into balance. The net effect of that is exactly what you just said, which is being able to respond well to people coming in, and let's say they bring up an issue with the manufacturer, or they bring an issue to you with part of an entrepreneur's journey is learning how to manage people, and so you have to be able to relate with people in a certain way. You have to be able to relate with your loved ones in a certain way, because you can't necessarily unload all of your stress on your loved ones, because they're not going to be loved ones for long if you do, right? And so there's all of these aspects. But what is fascinating about that kind of that sort of underlying thread between finance and biochemistry is that you get to see how at a very micro level this works, and how in reality, so few of us actually have a control over everything that we do. And then at a macro level, what happens when all of us get together and start making decisions. And so that's just a little 2 cents to add to what you said, which was so beautiful. And I do think that biochemistry and not just mastering one's emotions, but going another level deeper and saying, okay, what are the causes of those emotions? Some of those things you actually do have control over in terms of what you're doing throughout your day, what you're eating, how you're sleeping, and those kind of lifestyle areas.
Exactly. And a mindset, because
Yeah.
there was a quote I just shared today, Marcus Aurelius, who said, the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. And I think this is so true. So for a lot of people, I mean, you can optimize your supplement stack and stuff all you want, but if your mindset is not in a good place, then you will still struggle. So you need the mindset as well as all the other stuff.
Yeah, and Stoicism is a great way to train mindset. And whether you're reading Epictetus and the Enchiridion or Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, those are great ways to train your mindset. If you think about Marcus Aurelius, he was the emperor of Rome, right? And he would wake up every day and basically have somebody remind him, or he would remind himself about the fact that everything can be taken away from you, or you're going to encounter ungrateful people during the day. But I mean, it's one of those things that you can start training that, because oftentimes if you tell somebody, and this, Claudia, is sort of your background in molecular biology, if you tell somebody that their thoughts are not real, they're neural network depolarizations, that's not really going to land with people, because people are going to immediately be like, what do you mean my thoughts are not real? They're me. They're inside my head. But if you give them tools and tactics like Stoicism in order to deal with those thoughts behind it, that are going on in their head, and to sort of shape those thoughts, it does help you build that resilience to be the sort of anti-fragile entrepreneur that everybody wants to be.
Yeah, I think this body-mind connection is so important. Now, tell me more about Troscriptions. What exactly is it that you guys offer, and who is this for?
Sure. So I think a conversation with Troscriptions also involves a conversation about our nonprofit. So I'm going to start with the nonprofit first, because you'll see it connects together. And back when we were looking at starting these companies, because starting one company isn't hard enough, we decided to launch two at the same time. And I say that with a tone of sarcasm underneath. I've been told sometimes it's very hard to tell when I'm sarcastic. So just know that I'm being sarcastic. Like one company is very hard. Two companies is extremely hard. And it was a for-profit and a nonprofit. And it's something called the reciprocity model. And what do I mean by that? So health optimization medicine and practice is a clinical framework that we built, or I should say my mentor, Dr. Ted, built, he's been working with political leaders all around the world, executives, et cetera, for the past decade. And we train doctors and practitioners how to optimize for health rather than treat disease. There's 7 foundational pillars, and it's an online learning management system. And it includes things like clinical metabolomics, chronobiology, bioenergetics, so mitochondrial health, exposomics. We go into epigenetics, and we go into gut health, and of course, evolutionary biology. And so if you take all of that in a framework, and you also in that process are learning how to nutrient balance and hormone balance. And then as a clinician, you apply that framework to a patient that comes to visit you, or as a client if you're a health coach. And you will basically see that your clients, if they're diligent, will start to feel better, feel optimal in 6 to 9 months. Now, there's an inherent problem with that, because that problem is essentially, if somebody comes into you today and they're saying, I'm stressed, I have no focus, I can't sleep, and you tell them it's going to take 6 to 9 months to resolve, well, they're going to fire you, and they should. But what you can give them in the meantime is Troscriptions. So Troscriptions was started to really plug that gap of when you start with a health optimization practitioner and when that nutrient balance and hormone balancing kicks in. And so we say at Troscriptions, you don't need to take our products forever. But if you have an issue with focus, take Bluecanatine. If you have an issue with stress, take TroCalm. If you can't sleep at night, take TroZ. And if you certainly just want general health optimization and help with ATP production, which adenosine triphosphate is your body's energy currency, take Just Blue. And so we have this product line to really fill that gap between when you start today and when you start with your health optimization practitioner today and when it kicks in 6 to 9 months. But to answer your question a little bit more simply, who is it for? Well, if you are feeling like you're kind of 80% of the way there and you want to go from 80 to 100, there's certainly solutions for that, and Troscriptions provide those. If you are even at that 60% spectrum and you need, or even below, and you need just a little bit of help, a little bump today, there's solutions for that as well. And so Troscriptions is a very unique company in the sense that rather than giving you a capsule, what we do is we put all of our formulations into something called a buccal troche. Claudia, I'm not sure if you're familiar with a buccal troche, but I'll assume most of the audience isn't. And so a buccal troche is a lozenge that goes between your cheek and gums, and it dissolves in about 15 to 30 minutes. Now, why do we care about that? It's your upper cheek and gums, by the way. And so why is that important? Well, first, it's close to the venous structure of the brain, so you actually get an onset into the brain much faster. So for areas like focus and Bluecanatine, we get those ingredients to your brain in that 30 minutes. The buccal mucosa is actually a reliable 8 layers, and that again allows us to really give you less ingredients, a lower dose, and have a more reliable effect. If you actually put it underneath your tongue, it's 1 layer of skin, and then it goes through something called first pass metabolism. So anytime you swallow a capsule, anytime you use a lozenge, first pass metabolism takes effect. And so first pass metabolism, for those who are not familiar with it, is essentially how all pharmaceutical drugs or supplements are metabolized through your liver. And certain cases, if you don't really have a functioning liver, if you don't really have a functioning digestive system, that can be an issue. So you don't really get as reliable of effect. So with Troscriptions, the idea is how do we promote a very reliable effect to you in 15 to 30 minutes and get you that solution that you're looking for. So let's say you're an entrepreneur. TroCalm is fantastic. In fact, TroCalm was actually created for me by one of our 4 physicians on the team. And it helps with things like performance-related anxiety, so public speaking. That could be sexual performance anxiety. It can be, let's say you're going out on a date with somebody for the first time and you're just anxious about it. Take a quarter of a troche and it helps you take the edge off. It's a little different than alcohol in that case. And then you can also look at things like Bluecanatine for focus. So when you want to do like really strategic thinking, or if you want to really just grind through a financial model, like Bluecanatine can help you with that. So we have a product line which is ideally suited for the entrepreneur, but it also fits into this framework of health optimization more broadly.
That sounds super interesting. And on this podcast, we're super interested in all things that keep us happy, healthy, and productive. But we're also interested in all things business and entrepreneurship. So I want to take a short tangent and talk about your business model. So it looks like people can choose between the one-time pay purchases and some subscriptions. Now, can you share what made you opt for this business model and how many people actually opt for a subscription versus the one-time purchase?
Sure. So again, the business model overall is a reciprocity model. And if you think about, you can break down our customers into 3 different buckets. And those 3 different buckets are the optimal performer. And so this is where the entrepreneurial crowd fits in. They are sort of people that are symptomatic. So these are people that have an issue like stress, like not being able to sleep, etc. And then we have practitioners. So we actually work with doctors and healthcare practitioners to help them optimize the health of their clients. And so these are people who either have gone through the clinical framework in the nonprofit, or they are independent healthcare practitioners that just value our products because all of our products are third-party tested. We basically hold ourselves to a pharmaceutical standard, but we're a supplement company. And so when you kind of think about that whole gamut, what we also want people to do is to come in and try. And so there are cases where, somebody wants to come in and try a new focus supplement. So you have that one-time purchase option. For those who see success with that, you see an increased opt-in rate to a subscription. So right now, about 35% of our customer base is on subscription. And that is quite significant for a company of our size, but also because we haven't been around for too long. And so people are noticing these benefits when it comes to areas like focus. So they use the product as an alternative to some of the prescription medications out there. They also may use it. And again, I'm not knocking the prescription medications, but they've found results in that sense. We get customer feedback all the time that says, I was able to give up X and use your product as a result. And so we do have people that are on longer term subscription plans. And then we do have people that just want to try or occasionally bounce back and forth between products.
That makes sense. In terms of retention, how long do people usually take your supplements for? Is it something that you would recommend taking on and off, like cycling on and off, and just take whenever you think you need something like it? Or is it something that people should take over a longer period of time to see the most benefit?
Sure. So let's go through product by product, actually, because the answer to your question is actually, it depends. And it depends really on the product, right? And so let's start with the easy one. So Just Blue, which is pure pharmaceutical grade methylene blue. And you want to do pharmaceutical grade methylene blue because anything less, you always run the risk of heavy metal toxicity. And so one thing that is unique about Troscriptions is that we publish all of our tests on our website, third-party tests, and you can go and look at it. But Just Blue is methylene blue, and methylene blue helps increase ATP production in at least 8 different ways, meaning it gives you more energy. Also helps with memory, spatial and non-spatial memory. It's being studied for Parkinson's. It's being studied for Alzheimer's, although we don't really mess in any sort of claims there. But you can take that every single day. And so I swallow Just Blue every single day. And there's 0 cycling with me for that. If you are taking higher dose methylene blue, which I'll come to in a second, there's a reason to cycle. Now, in the case of blue cannatine, which blue cannatine contains 1 milligram of nicotine, it contains methylene blue, it contains CBD, and it also contains caffeine. I don't take that every day, and none of our customers do or should. There are reasons why you should take it, but it should be used sporadically when needed. So in the medical world, it's called PRN. And so when would you need blue cannatine? So deep work sessions, blue cannatine is great. Blue cannatine is great for endurance workouts. So I use it for when I do Murph every year on Memorial Day. I'm not a CrossFitter anymore, but when I do Murph every year on Memorial Day, just for fun, I use blue cannatine because it helps me pace out my workouts. It helps me with lateral thinking, so making connections where they weren't normally possible before. So blue carnitine is something that you really only need to take every once in a while. And you probably need a quarter to a half a troche when you take it, because it does give you a boost and you will feel it. Trocalm, again, this isn't, it depends. If you have anxiousness all the time, well, use it all the time for help, because it will be therapeutic to you. But if you are a person who is afraid of public speaking, you can use it for that, and then it's more situational. If you're a person who is trying to give up alcohol and looking for an alternative, Trocalm contains kava. Kava is it's kind of largely misunderstood, particularly in Europe, because there was a lot of things that happened in the 90s around dodgy kava supplies. But kava comes from the Pacific Islands, so places where Claudia, you and I, both of our spouses come from near the Pacific Islands, right? So it's, or both of our partners. And so Vanuatu is one of the homes to kava. And in the Pacific Islands, it's been served as a drink, a celebration beverage for hundreds of years. It's actually served in certain cases before wars, but it's relaxing. The other aspect of Trocalm is that we have B3 GABA in there, which is a GABA agonist. You may have heard of gamma aminobutyric acid, or GABA. What most people don't know is that when you swallow a GABA capsule, it actually doesn't cross your blood-brain barrier. And so it may help your gut, it may help your body relax, but it's not helping your brain relax. Most of us entrepreneurs, what do we need to relax the most? Our brain. And so if you need to relax, taking Trocalm, either a quarter or a half, or if you want to take it before bed because you're the type that needs to shut off very quickly, well, Trocalm can be helpful there. Troz is our sleep formulation. Troz you can use every night if you have sleep-related issues. So if you have an issue with onset, it'll help you fall asleep. If you have an issue with staying asleep, we have a very potent GABA agonist in there called Agarin. And Agarin, actually what it does, and what I love about it, because my issue is that I wake up in the middle of the night, and when this thing starts going, I'm like, oh God, get me into a spreadsheet. I got to get some stuff done, right? And so what I love about Agarin is that it helps dim that down a little bit so that I can get back to sleep. I wake up, I get my 8 hours or my 7 hours, and I'm ready to go. And then finally, the last product that I'll mention is from our practitioner only line. It's called Tro Plus Blue. And this, I love it, but you don't take it every day, because it's 50 milligrams of methylene blue, which if you take a high dose every day, you can do stuff to your biofilm in your gut. But if you're getting sick and you happen to be working with a practitioner, they can give you Tro Plus Blue, and it's an antiviral, it's an antifungal, and it's a beautiful way to give yourself an antioxidant boost to help you recover and get back, to really get back at it as fast as possible. Because what's the worst thing for an entrepreneur is the days you can't work, right? And so it helps you kind of recover a lot faster. So those are kind of product by product, how you would use it.
Oh, thank you so much for the clarification. That makes so much sense. Now, again, from a business perspective, what have been your biggest challenges so far, and how did you address them?
Sure. There are so many. So, and what I love about our business is because we're not your typical supplement company. We're not going to produce a vitamin C anytime soon. In fact, what we do is we produce formulations, and we produce formulations for an effect. So let me give you a little sense of our formulation process, Claudia, because I think it's interesting to everybody from a business perspective. So what we do is we initially decide, what are we trying to solve for? So let's take, for instance, Trocalm, which is stress. How do we produce a relaxing experience for somebody who is stressed? Or Troz, where how do you keep somebody asleep, get them to stay asleep, et cetera. Sleep is a very complex issue. So let's focus on stress for now. What we do then is we build a library. We look at sort of the mechanisms of action behind stress, and you start to get into very finite conversations around neurotransmitters, the receptors, how they work, what is a positive allosteric modulator versus an agonist. And you build a list of compounds that can affect these receptors and their affinity for those receptors. So then we take those compounds and we first we're dissolving all boundaries. So everything goes on there. And then as we're looking at that list, we start to check off, okay, this is illegal, so take it away. And, this is incredibly expensive, so it goes over into bucket A. And then this is used too commonly, and it gets chucked away. And so what we end up with is a finite list of compounds that work for the formulation that we're trying to create. And then I go on a hunt all around the world. And this is one of the issues, right? Is trying to find some of these compounds. And so trying to find some of these compounds, you end up talking to places like China. And so as soon as I say China, everybody starts to say, okay, red flag. But we test everything as soon as it comes on shore using the best testing methods out there, which is usually an HPLC test. We test it for purification. And then once we have the compound on shore, so first problem that we have to solve is sourcing that compound. And sometimes that involves going to China, India, et cetera. But also what we've done is we've built partnerships with a pharmaceutical R&D lab, and this is a pharmaceutical company R&D lab in the United States. We also have a partnership with a university in South Africa who can help make these compounds for us. So if it's too expensive, we can synthesize. If it's not too expensive, we'll go out and buy it. Once we've bought that, we then have to bring it on shore. So we not only have an issue with sourcing the product, we have an issue with sourcing the quality products. Once we bring it on shore, we test it HPLC testing. Then from there, somebody in our group, in our sort of core group of people, usually has the issue. So in the case of Trocalm, the stress issue, to be fair, was me. And so we would test it on that person. So I'm patient 0. And if it works on me, then we start testing it on others. And so we have our sort of beta testing group, and that allows us to get feedback. And if it works through the beta testing group, we then start to the kind of concentric circles build out. And eventually we come out with a product that we like and we release, right? So that whole development line is quite long, lengthy, and involves a lot of iteration, right? So there was numerous problems that I just tackled there. One is like sourcing the ingredients. So that's one. The other issue is because we're not doing this in capsules, there are very few people that make troches. And so finding a good troche manufacturer is gold. And so those are problems that we have to solve. And then, of course, there's other things like getting cold delivery, because a troche will melt when it's above 35 degrees Celsius for periods of time. So during the summer in the United States, in places like Arizona, we actually have to send them cold packed in order for the troche to arrive safely. So there's a lot of issues that we've had to solve, and that doesn't even cover the issue of how to run 2 companies at the same time, right? So those are just kind of a handful within the Troscriptions vertical, but I'm happy to go through more if you want.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I was just wondering, as you explained your process, how much COVID impacted your supply chain and all the associated issues. If you want, maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So look, our supply chain spans anywhere from middle of nowhere China to South Africa, as I mentioned, to in some cases India, and various other stops in between. Our manufacturing is predominantly done in the United States. So COVID, and like we get packaging in China. So COVID, much to the chagrin of everybody out there, did impact our business in a big way. We had issues where, getting on a boat from China to the United States was a very big problem for a long time. So we would have to send things via air. So we would basically put our packaging on a plane just to meet the demand. But the flip side of our business is that we operate in this vertical known as health, right? And so what was everybody all of the sudden focused on around the world was their health. And so you took a world, which is, I mean, we can look at just sort of epidemiology, right? And you know that in the United States, roughly 2/3 of the people are overweight. I'm here in the Netherlands right now. Roughly half of the population is overweight. That's BMI, so it's not the most perfect statistic, but on bigger populations, it tends to work. And so all of a sudden, everybody became interested in health almost overnight. So for us, it was a net benefit. But the issue became keeping up with the demand because of our supply chain being global. How were we going to get packaging, which was actually the biggest issue, from China all the way to the United States when every boat was full, or you have a boat sitting outside of Long Beach or a shipping container, not boat. I mean, this isn't going on Bezos's yacht, right? Like it's going on a shipping container in a giant vessel. And it would be sitting there for a couple of weeks and you'd have no clue when it was going to get there. At points were like, can I swim out to it and go grab the stuff? But that wasn't available to us. And then, one of the great pleasures of running a health company is when you get to interact with people in person. And so we do a lot of our business with practitioners, and it's lovely to talk to a practitioner and how they're using our products in person. But conferences went the way of the dodo for a while, right? There wasn't access to people. We couldn't have a conference. And frankly, virtual conferences never really did the trick. And so there are numerous impacts, but I would say overall, as a company, we benefited greatly from a demand perspective during that particular time period.
It does sound like a very challenging time, though.
Yeah, it certainly was. It was challenging for everybody, right? So some people had challenges of, like, for instance, here in Amsterdam, we were relatively open, right? The only thing that really changed was I couldn't go to the gym, and restaurants were closed. But for me, I could still walk outside, go grab a coffee. I couldn't sit in the cafe, but I could grab a coffee and come back. I had to build a home gym, net benefit. But broadly speaking, my life wasn't too drastically different than it is today. You had other instances. I had friends in New York City who they couldn't leave their apartments for a while. I have friends that were in Shanghai who they had a baby in the middle of all of this, and they couldn't leave their apartment for 3 months. And it's like, how do you do that with a newborn baby? I have no clue, but they managed to make it work. And so for me, sure, it was a very challenging time, but what's been helpful for me is something that, again, a person who I would call a mentor, although I had very limited direct interaction with him. His name's Anshu Jain, and Anshu recently passed away, rest in peace. Anshu ran Deutsche Bank from a time period, I want to say around 2007-ish, through the financial crisis until a couple of years ago. And Anshu was an incredibly high-performing guy, incredibly meticulous. He was terrifying to talk to at times because he was just always on top of it. And one of the things that I remember learning from Anshu was perspective. And during the financial crisis, Anshu was sort of thinking like, dear God, like, this is really bad. Deutsche Bank or whatever bank was going through a lot of issues. And then somebody pointed out to him, like, hey, at least you're not Lehman Brothers, right? And so, there's always that perspective. And so even today, as we kind of go through our struggles, keep in mind, like, I'm not in Israel and I hate what's going on there. I'm not in Ukraine. So, like, there is always that perspective that helps that does help We talked earlier about mindset. When it comes to mindset, it helps flip your mindset pretty quickly. So if you're kind of sitting here and saying like, dear God, woe is me, I can't get a sale or whatever, flipping your mindset, just those quick perspective shifts certainly help.
So important. Now, when we talk about biohacking and health optimization, we kind of also have to talk about tracking and measuring what works,
Ooh,
right?
this is my favorite. Okay.
I am curious to hear, what health metrics do you personally track, and what are your favorite wearables, if you use any?
I do. I have 2 on right now. At least 2. I might have more. And now so I would like to just present a framework, because I think this is useful for an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs all love benchmarking. We benchmark our business in terms of sales. We might have a cost benchmark. We might have a people benchmark. OKRs are quite a big framework, right? That everybody's obsessed with. But you can also passport this stuff to your health. So there are daily metrics that I have, there are weekly metrics that I have, and then there's every 6 months metrics that I have. So I'm going to start backwards to forwards. So those every 6 months metrics that I do, and this comes from our clinical framework in health optimization medicine practice. Frankly, go work with a health optimization practitioner. They can take you through this. But I test my metabolomics once every 6 months. And that's several hundred benchmarks that look at aspects of the Krebs cycle. So how we produce energy as in our cells. And then we look at what is impacting the health of things like our mitochondria. And those can be things like heavy metal toxicities. It can be imbalances in nutrients and things that you don't necessarily see. And so testing brings you an awareness to that. And based on that 6 months, every 6 months testing of metabolomics, also hormones, my gut, so I do a 3-day stool test every 6 months. That allows me to tell exactly what supplements I need. Maybe some of the things I need to change about my behavior. For instance, every 6 months I'm doing stool testing. I'm also traveling all the time. I was in the United States 7 days ago. I'm going to the United States on Thursday. I've been in Asia twice this year, and we were talking beforehand, I'm going to New Zealand at the end of the year. Those bouncing around time zones, well, that's something that yeast loves. And yeast, when it's in overgrowth, something like candida, can actually impact performance quite significantly. It can be a miserable thing to have. So you have every 6 months, you get your hormones tested, you do a 3-day stool test, you do a food sensitivity test, and you do a metabolomics test. That allows you to do a little bit of adjustment on your diet. Then let's go back to that every week. So every week I sit down and I look at things like a weekly performance assessment. Am I able to achieve the tasks that I need to? So I take a look at something like a Todoist, which is and this is where we're overlapping productivity with health, right? Because ultimately, health for what, right? Performance, it's a fitness function, right? So fitness for what? And so for me, I'm optimizing all these biomarkers so I can be a better entrepreneur. And so how do I tell if I'm a better entrepreneur? Well, my Todoist and how many tasks I checked off is certainly a way to do that. Looking at those important tasks and seeing how many of those checked off, that's another way to do that. So there's a weekly planning session, if you will. Some of this actually comes from the work of David Allen, although I think getting things done it's something that works for certain people. It worked for me for a while, but after a while it became almost a stressor in itself to keep up with that. And so some of it comes from getting things done. It's an adopted framework that I've created for myself. Most of it comes from Gregory McEwen's Essentialism. So focusing on really those big, important goals and trying to say no. And so one of the metrics that I review every single week is the amount of times I've said no to something. And so it's simple as that, right? And then from a health standpoint, I'm sitting there and reviewing, okay, did I do something as simple as go to the bathroom every single day? And by go to the bathroom, I mean, did I have a bowel movement every single day? Did I sleep 8 hours every single day, or 7 at a bare minimum? If I didn't, why was it? And so I have these weekly sessions with myself, and it's usually an hour, maybe 90 minutes. and I'm going through my calendar. Was my calendar managed effectively? Because ultimately it's fitness for what? And then let's go back to the daily metrics now. So we've already gone through our monthly metrics, or sorry, a 6-month metrics. We've gone through our weekly metrics and then our daily metrics. And so I have 2 wearables, one of which is the Whoop. The other one's in my Oura Ring. Those are the ones that I use the most frequently. There's a company called Massimo in California, which a dear friend of mine works at. And so I probably will have the Massimo watch when the consumer watch comes out. But the Massimo company itself recently became famous because their patent was using the Apple iWatch, but they didn't really pay. Apple didn't pay for it, so there was a whole lot of patent litigation, right? And so Massimo, their consumer watch has the best, most accurate metrics, and will have the best, most accurate metrics because they're more focused on the medical component. But the user interface is shit. So, it depends. You have to kind of think about this in terms of, are you more of a user experience person, or do you care about the data? And for me, I usually care about the data, but let's kind of go through those daily metrics that I'm looking at. And so I wear 2 wearables for 2 different reasons. Now, the Whoop is fantastic as an activity tracker. It's not as great as a sleep tracker. And I wear the Whoop in particular because most of my clients like the fact that it's a wristband. And so if my clients are using it, I'm using it because I want to know everything that they're getting and that types of information that they're getting. The added benefit of Whoop right now, by the way, is that they just integrated GPT-4. And so you can it's awesome. So now I can ask it, okay, based on my recovery, I have 20 minutes to work out and I'm focused on legs. What do you recommend? And it actually gives me a pretty decent workout to do in the gym. I don't necessarily follow it because I've got a background in powerlifting and CrossFit, and so I like to create my own workouts. But for the person out there listening who wants the trainer coach in their pocket, this is coming pretty close, right? The Whoop also takes, I think, 15 measurements per minute, whereas Oura takes a little bit less. And, if some of my friends from Oura are listening to this, I'm sorry. I do love the ring. The ring, this actually doubles as my wedding ring, by the way. But the Oura ring I use more as a sleep tracker. I think whereas Whoop is a better activity tracker, not great. Oura is not a great activity tracker. It's a better sleep tracker. Again, they're not perfect at each. And so all of this data kind of feeds into my weekly assessment of myself, but also it allows me to do things like plan out my workouts for the day. So let's say like last night, I was working pretty late because I'm an entrepreneur, and everybody here knows that sometimes you have to work pretty late. And so when I got up in the morning, my first thought wasn't to go and do 175 kg squat, right? My first thought is like, okay, how do I give my body the tools it needs to recover? And one of the things that I think is very important to point out for entrepreneurs in particular is this idea of stress, right? And let's talk about stress in terms of a bucket. So just picture a bucket, and depending on who you are, your bucket may be larger, it may be smaller, but that bucket is the maximum amount of stress that your body can handle. And stress can come from all kinds of places. It can come from the mold in your walls. It can come from your relationship with your partner. It can come from your business, of course. It can come from exercise in the wrong form. It can come from bad nutrition. And that all goes into the bucket. But it's important to replenish that bucket and empty it out. And emptying it out is the recovery. And so what the wearables actually help me do, so what Whoop and Oura help me do, is they help me determine how full is my bucket and how much I need to dump out, meaning how much do I need to focus on recovery. So I will take a look at this, and I'll focus in particular on something called heart rate variability, which is the distance between your 2 heartbeats. And that really is an effective measurement of the health of your nervous system. I'll also look at resting heart rate to be able to tell just how relaxed I am or how sympathetic dominant I am. And based on that, and based on a handful of other metrics, I can see firsthand through these wearables how full my bucket is. And so sometimes I may wake up and the Whoop may say like, hey, your HRV is cut by 2/3. Or back when I used to drink, and by the way, this is also how I ended up giving up alcohol. Back when I used to drink, I would see like, okay, I had a couple of glasses of wine and now my resting heart rate is in the 70s and normally it's in like the 40s. What the hell is going on here? And that allows me to assess, okay, is this a yoga day? Going back to my mom as a yoga teacher, shout out mom. And then, or is this like a breathwork day? Is this a red light day? Those types of things you all kind of find out by taking these metrics, and it allows you, it really brings awareness to your situation. Because one thing about entrepreneurs that I know, particularly successful ones, that they're very good at is they're very good at making themselves numb, meaning that they can detach themselves from their bodies to be able to perform at a higher rate. No problem at doing that in certain periods. Like if you're going out and doing an IPO, you're probably going to have to make yourself numb to go through the roadshow. But when you're done, giving yourself that time to recover. I know really quickly when I've either made myself too numb for too long, or if I'm starting to detach from myself, because these metrics remind me every single day.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Thank you so much for sharing. That was super informative. And I love that you mentioned that the wearables help you stay flexible and adaptive, because that's an approach that I'm trying to incorporate more as well. Oftentimes people have a strict, say, exercise schedule where they say, okay, Monday is leg day, on Sundays I go for a long run, on Wednesdays I do whatever. So for me, I find that I do like to train for different adaptations, but now I consider more what state I'm currently in. Like, if I haven't slept well, then I might not want to do the long run in the morning, or I might do, say, yoga for flexibility, something like that. That's more, that's gentle,
Yeah.
and doesn't cause any extra stress. So I'm much more flexible in my approach as well. Now, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Wow. There's so much to share. So what I would just say is, look, if any of this resonates to you, there are communities out there that can help. So first, if you're an entrepreneur listening to this, I think there's a tendency, and there's actually a very dark corner of entrepreneurship that doesn't get talked about a lot. And this is the depression side of it. This is the failed business side of it. We hear a lot about the successes, the unicorns, but we don't hear a lot about entrepreneurs and mental health or physical health, frankly. So I'm really glad, Claudia, that you're bringing this to light. You're having these conversations. So thank you for having me. But if you're an entrepreneur, it's hard to do this alone. And what I mean is like, of course, you're building your business, but try to build yourself a team of advisors. We all have advisory boards for our companies, but a team of advisors, and make sure that those advisors include people that are helping you watch your own finances, helping you look at things like mental health, physical health. I've been fortunate enough along the way that I have a very good team of those, and those types of people, and in certain cases you may need to pay for it, but it's worth it every cent. The ROI on those types of people is incredible, because it will allow you to focus on what you want to do, which is likely building your business. That's why most of us become entrepreneurs, and allow you to come and show up to that with a higher performance, health optimized level. So again, for those of the people that are interested in it, we do have trained health optimization practitioners all around the world. Homehope.org is probably the place to go find one of those. And those people are trained in a framework that works really, really well for the entrepreneur. So I would just encourage anybody, if anything I said today grabs you in a good way, go check that out.
Perfect. So any other places where you would like people to connect with you online? What's your favorite platform?
So for me, if you want to follow our company's Troscriptions, the Instagram is our marketing company is fantastic, and their Instagram, TikTok, you can find Troscriptions everywhere. You can go to see the nonprofit at homehope.org or at homehope.org on Instagram. And then for me personally, LinkedIn is basically the only place where I pay attention to it. For the most part, or at least going forward, I will have somebody else checking these things for me. But LinkedIn, again, because it's a community of people who are building things in the world, and that's this intersection between health and business is something that I care about immensely. And so that's where I like to have my conversations.
Perfect. Boomer, thank you so much for sharing all those tips and insights with us today. It's been a great pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Claudia. And hopefully we can get together either in Germany or in New Zealand in the future.
Yes, that would be awesome. Until then, take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Wired for Success podcast. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. That's a fantastic, easy, and zero-cost way to help the show grow. Just use the link in the show notes and make my day. Want more? For quick, actionable tips and insights to guided meditations and a side of biohacking, join my inner circle and get access to exclusive subscriber-only content. Again, just use the link in the show notes to join the tribe. Thank you for your support and see you on the other side. Take care and talk soon. Bye.